Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Claire and this is Books and Seasons. Before going into this video, I want to take a moment to address the current social climate in this country right now. I want to make explicitly clear that myself and this channel stand with and will always stand with Black people fighting against the injustices that have been enacted against them since the beginning of this country and before. I stand with the protesters and the rioters in Minneapolis, in my city of Madison, Wisconsin, and in every other city where there are protests. To my white followers, I hope that you are taking advantage of the resources that are being delivered to you by BookTube right now. I have seen so many booktubers and people on Book Twitter step up and provide resources and donation links for their followers, and I will be doing the same in my description. I also want to hype up the booktuber bowtiesandbooks. Jesse has been on the front lines of the Minneapolis protests. They have been tear gassed. They have been witnessing and suffering from the violence incited by police at these protests. And watching their stories is a true look into what these protests look like and a true insight into what the news isn't showing you. So I not only encourage you to follow Jesse's channel, but I also encourage you to follow their Instagram, where you can see these stories that are from the protests, and to donate to their Venmo, as they are gathering supplies to protect protesters from tear gas and rubber bullets and all of the violence that is being incited against them by police. This is my first ever wrap up, so that's exciting. And I'm also really excited because I read some great books in May. And I also read a lot of books in May. I read 12 books, which is more books than I've read in a month since I was probably 10. So let's get into it though. So this month I read 12 books. I read 1 2-star book. I read 2 3-star books. I read 3 4-star books, and I read 5 5-star books. I also had 1 book that I didn't rate because it was a memoir and I didn't know how to rate it. The first book that I read this month was Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. Miracle Creek follows the group of people who surround a tragic event at an oxygen therapy center. The summer before this book takes place, the oxygen therapy center blew up with several people inside of it and killed 2 people. The first person who was killed is a mother of 4 who took her son to the oxygen therapy center for treatment for his autism. And the other person who died was a child with autism whose mother ended up surviving. Now, this book follows the trial for the person charged of this crime, which is the mother of the child who died. I love a book with moral ambiguity in it. I love a book that does not allow you to see things as black and white or right or wrong. And Miracle Creek does that better than almost any book I've ever read. I also thought that it was really exciting because I like reading about trials a lot. And lastly, I thought it was beautiful. So Angie Kim is a really great writer, and I think that her writing style really works for me because it's beautiful and it has really realistic descriptions of everyday events and feelings, but written in such a way like that I could never describe it. And that's something that I tend to really appreciate in writing. I also just thought like the way that she described the environment of this book, which it takes place in the summer. There's this creek that is kind of the center of everything. And I really enjoyed that too. So I recommend reading this in the summer, or at least like late spring. But I gave it 5 stars. I can't wait to read whatever Angie Kim writes next. The second book that I read this month was Alex Approximately by Jen Bennett. So this book follows our protagonist Bailey as she moves away from the East Coast, where she lived with her mom, to go live with her dad on the West Coast in California. Now, she already happens to know somebody who lives in the same town as her dad, It's her friend Alex, who she talks to online all the time about classic films because she is big into classic films. Her and Alex are pretty good friends, but they really don't know that much about each other in a real life setting. She knows that Alex isn't even his real name, and he doesn't know her real name. So before she jumps right in and tries to get to know him and maybe explore the romantic connection that they have in person, she wants to make sure that he is who he says he is. And she also wants to make sure that he is somebody that she would want to get to know. So she makes it her mission over the summer to find him on her own based on the clues that she has through their conversations, and just kind of scope him out and make sure that he is the Alex that she imagines. Now, there is another storyline as well, as Bailey gets a job at a very kooky museum where she meets a security guard around her age named Porter. Porter is, she thinks, really annoying. He's kind of mean to her at first, and isn't that how the best romances start? And that is kind of how we're entering the story. There's a lot of antics in this book that are really fun. I really loved how it explored cozy details. Again, that is just something that I really love in books, the small details that make you feel cozy and warm. One of those in this book is that her dad loves playing Settlers of Catan, and they do, and it's really cute. This book really delivers in that aspect, and that is part of what made it such a great read for me. It just delivered in every way I wanted it to as a summer contemporary romance. I would highly recommend it. I gave it 5 stars, and I don't know, it might top The Summer I Turned Pretty for me as a summer contemporary, which is a big deal because The Summer I Turned Pretty is a great series, and it kind of defined and began my love for summer contemporaries. So if that's not a glowing recommendation, then I don't know what is. Please pick this up if you like summer contemporary. The third book that I read this month was The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. I have been excited about this book ever since it came out, not only because it has a really cool cover, but because a thriller or horror book set at an isolated motel sounds really fun to me. So I was really excited about this. It follows our protagonist in the present day as she tries to find information on her aunt who went missing a few decades before. We also get chapters from the perspective of her aunt, who is working at the Sundown Motel in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. That's all I'm going to say, but this book is quite different than other thrillers to me. It just had a really different tone, I guess I would say, because most thrillers to me feel very bleak, but this one had a little bit of wholesomeness to it. I thought the characters were pretty likable, and I really liked the relationships between them. And I don't know, I also thought this book was really feminist, but in a wholesome way. So that's why it is a lot different than other thrillers to me. But this book also kind of let me down because while it did have that refreshing wholesomeness to it, it really wasn't scary. I didn't think it was thrilling. I didn't think it was suspenseful. And so I was pretty bored with it. I gave this book, I think, 3.5 stars because I really appreciated how it differs from the genre, and I really appreciated its message. But it really just kind of fits into the 3-star umbrella because I couldn't hardly even remember that I read it this month, and it just was a bit disappointing for me. However, I would still recommend it if the premise sounds exciting to you. Just be aware that you're probably not going to be too scared by it. The fourth book I read this month was Open Book by Jessica Simpson. Now, I really didn't know much about Jessica Simpson going into this book because I was still pretty young when she was at the height of her fame, and I honestly did not know that much about why she was famous. I had no idea that she had a pop singing career, that she was almost on the Mickey Mouse Club. So that was cool to learn about. I also learned a lot about her struggles with fame, the way that she was kind of beat down by the media and treated like she was stupid. I thought that was interesting, and I definitely can see that. However, I did not think that this book really offered anything new in terms of celebrity memoirs. I think that it's good, but I didn't want to give it a rating because I just don't want to rate somebody's life. And unless like a memoir really stands out to me, I just don't feel like I want to rate it. However, if you are interested in it at all, I would recommend it. It was cool. And I ended up watching a lot of old clips from her and Nick Lachey's old reality show, which is really funny to watch now. The fifth book I read in May was Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This book gets a lot of hype and attention on BookTube, and I probably wouldn't have read it if not for BookTube. But I'm grateful for the attention it's gotten because I really loved it. If you don't know about Scythe yet, it follows a dystopian society where everyone is immortal now, and so to control the population, there are a few people appointed to decide who dies, and those people are called scythes. They are appointed to kill people to control the population. So this book follows two teenagers who are being trained to be scythes, and one of them will have to beat the other one to become the scythe out of this apprenticeship. So that is kind of where we are starting with this book. My cat is about to jump on this chair. Don't do that. Hey. I think he wants attention. This book also follows the theme of corruption and like how can a scythe do their job in a just way, and how can you control for people who aren't going to attempt to be just. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the themes of this book. I liked the characters. I thought it was exciting, and I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I gave this book 5 stars, and I would recommend it. The sixth book that I read in May is One of Us Is Next. I was pretty nervous going into this book just because the first book of this series, One of Us Is Lying, is a book that I really enjoyed, but I read it back in December 2018. And at the time, I wasn't reading. It was actually one of the books that ushered in a new era of reading for me because it showed me how YA had really changed and adapted. Hey, my cat wants to jump up on this chair, which is where my phone is. What are you doing? What are you doing? The first book in this duology, I guess, One of Us Is Lying, I read back in December 2018. And at the time, I thought it was so good. I thought it was really refreshing. And it kind of ushered in a new era of reading for me because it showed me just how much YA had changed over the years to kind of like adapt to our modern climate and what high school is like nowadays. So I thought it was really refreshing at the time, and it felt new. However, it ushered in a new era of me reading, and so I've been reading so many good YA since I read that book. And I was worried that it wasn't actually as good as I thought it was, and that I wouldn't like this next book because of that. However, when I read One of Us Is Next, I was actually reminded of why I enjoyed One of Us Is Lying so much. I think that if you're looking for a thriller, this isn't really it. Neither is One of Us Is Lying. McManus is really good at writing high school and high school characters and high school relationships. I like how she handled the romance in this book, and I like how she writes friendships. One thing that I'm a sucker for is like if a group of friends have kind of a hangout spot in town, and I liked that about this book. There's just a lot of community in it, and I know I haven't talked about what it's about, but it is the sequel to One of Us Is Lying, so I don't want to give anything away, but it's just kind of a continuation of that story and the thriller aspect of that story. The next book that I read in May was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. So if you follow me on Bookstagram or on Goodreads, you already know how I feel about this book. I've talked about it quite a bit. I kind of agree with a lot of people who have already reviewed it in my feelings that this book did not need to exist. It is not a necessary addition to the series, and its value really is mostly in like the insight you get into the origin of the Hunger Games. I was pretty bored throughout most of it. And I know that a lot of people were worried that this book was going to do a little too much to redeem him, that his villain backstory was going to make us sympathize with him. And I don't think that that's true. I think if anything, this book showed us that that President Snow does indeed have a conscience, and that he is all the more evil for ignoring it in service of his selfish search for power. Throughout, 450 pages of it, his evil was pretty subtle, and you could pick up on it, and I liked being able to kind of analyze it for that. However, then in the last, 20 to 50 pages of it, you are just hit over the head with a fucking hammer with his evil. Like, it just comes out of nowhere, and it feels like it's making up for lost time, and it was just kind of a bizarre ending. So I think that a lot of other people have felt that way too. I don't know. I gave this 3 stars. I think I originally said it might deserve a 3.5, but I'm just keeping it at 3 stars. It really didn't do much for me, but there were some parts that I was enjoying. So I don't know. If you are looking for that feeling that you got with the Hunger Games trilogy, I wouldn't look for it here, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad book. It just was pretty disappointing. The next book that I read in May was The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker. I read this after watching Ariel Bissett's video on books set during pandemics, and I was really excited about it after watching that video. So let me tell you a bit about the book. It follows, at first, some students who live on one floor of a college dorm. One girl on that floor ends up going to bed one night and never waking up. She ends up passing away. And then suddenly a few more people who live on the same floor end up the same position. They end up going to bed one night and never waking up, although not all of them are dying. Some of them are just in perpetual state of sleep. It's soon discovered that this is some kind of virus, and the floor of this dorm is quarantined. The disease still does get out, and it ends up spreading around this entire municipality in California. And it just follows the stories of the people impacted by the pandemic. It follows several different people, and their stories do end up intertwining a bit. I really liked this book. I thought it was so unique. I've never read a book that was written like this before. It is similar to Angie Kim's writing in Miracle Creek that I was talking about, in how it's able to describe everyday human feelings in a way that is so succinct and beautiful, and just, I would never be able to say these things in that way, and that's what I really love about it. However, this book does kind of have a more passive look into its characters. Miracle Creek is, you are palpably in the heads of these characters. And in The Dreamers, you definitely feel more like an outsider looking in. However, this book still felt very rooted in humanity to me, if that makes sense. Like, the whole idea of the book felt to me like very focused on human connection and human love in the face of tragedy and chaos. So I really appreciated that as well. I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. If you think that the premise sounds interesting, I would absolutely recommend it to you. The next book that I read in May is The Bromance Book Club by Lyssa Kay Adams. So this book is talked about a lot on BookTube. It is about our main guy, Gavin, who is a Major League Baseball player in quite a bit of trouble with his wife. She wants a divorce because he has been focused on his career and hasn't been the husband that he should have been. But he is devastated, and he is not ready to give up on this marriage yet. He ends up being recruited into this book club, and all these men have also been in a similar situation to Gavin. They have been in trouble in their marriages, and they've used romance books to try and figure out how to make their wives more happy, how to be more romantic, and really just understand how to decenter themselves in their romantic relationships. This book has great social commentary, but it's also just so funny and cute. I really loved this book. I'm always looking for funny and cute contemporaries, but this one felt like it's now the new standard for me of what I'm looking for. This book actually takes place between Thanksgiving and Christmas. The protagonist Gavin has until Christmas to basically win his wife back. And at first I was kind of bummed out by that because don't get me wrong, I love a book that's set in the holiday season, but I didn't want to read that book in May. I wanted to read it in the time that it's set in, and this would be a book that I would typically save for that time of year. I didn't realize that this book was going to be so set during the holidays until I was over 100 pages into it and really enjoying it. So I considered putting it down and picking it back up in November, but I'm so glad that I stuck with it, and I think that I will probably reread it in the holidays. I think as I recommend this book to you, that I would recommend picking up that time of year as well. But I'm so glad I stuck with it, because instead of just waiting, I just got like a pumpkin spice candle out and lit that while I read it, and just embraced the fall and the holiday feelings that it has. And that really worked for me. I truly felt the serotonin in my body. So this book was so good. I gave it 5 stars. It's great, and I would absolutely recommend it. The next book that I read in May was a reread for me because it's extremely relevant right now, and that was The Fire This Time by Jesmyn Ward. This is an anthology of essays and poems that Jesmyn Ward collected for this book, and it is in the spirit of James Baldwin's book, The Fire Next Time, which is a staple of the Black literature canon for good reason. I would highly recommend it. And this book is kind of meant to respond to and update James Baldwin's original book, kind of speak to the Black experience in America in our modern time. This book was written in 2016. There's already a lot that's happened in the years since then, but it is still quite relevant. And I gave it 5 stars. I think that it's always important to return to books like this, because while they are so illuminating, they can fade away after time. And it's important to kind of refresh yourself, especially if you are white, with those messages and those reminders of how you can help and just how important it is to help. So yeah, this book was great, and I would recommend it, especially right now. The next book that I read in May was Cracked Up to Be by Courtney Summers. Now, Sadie by Courtney Summers is one of my favorite books ever, and so I was really excited to read Courtney Summers' debut, Cracked Up to Be. This was actually published in 2008, but it was reissued last year after all the success that Sadie saw. I thought this was really interesting to read as somebody who has read and enjoyed Sadie so much, because you can definitely see the same style and the same ideas in this book as you can see in Sadie. And Parker definitely feels like a predecessor to Sadie, but it is so different. And Courtney Summers' writing is a lot more raw and biting and just kind of rough around the edges, which is exactly what our protagonist Parker is like as well. This book follows Parker, who was formerly the most popular girl, the most perfect girl. She was focused on perfection. She had perfect grades. She demanded perfection from the people around her. We are following her after an event that has changed her completely. She is no longer trying. She no longer wants anyone to care about her. She's trying to distance herself from everyone who loves her, and she just doesn't care anymore. And she's very good at pushing people away. She is a huge bitch. And that was interesting to read about, because you don't really, even today, see characters like Parker in YA, people who are so unlikable. But I actually really liked Parker, I think that people, if they make the effort to understand her, they will resonate with her. While this book wasn't perfect, I think that it is a really excellent debut. Of course, I still love Sadie the most, but I really appreciated this book. And I think that's all I have to say about it. Like, it's a good story, and I would recommend it. The last book that I read in May was Girl Gone Viral by Alicia Ray. This book follows Katrina, our protagonist, after she is captured in a viral tweet thread and video where she is talking to this guy, and it looks like the perfect meet cute, and it really captures the attention of the internet. However, that is quite a problem for Katrina because she is a huge recluse. She suffers from panic disorder, and so she mostly stays at home. Her excursion to this cafe is kind of a one-off occurrence for her. She also has stuff in her past that makes her not want to be found by certain people. So the viral tweet thread and attention to her is actually quite alarming. And so her bodyguard, Jazz, actually takes her away from her home and to his family farm to get away from any attention that could come her way. At Jazz's family farm, Katrina and him kind of realize their feelings for each other, and it really doesn't get much more exciting than that. This book was my only 2-star read of the month. I really wanted to like it, but it just did not work for me. I didn't think that it was interesting at all. I was really bored, and I probably should have just DNF'd it. It's not that the characters or the story were bad in any way. Like, the characters are quite likable, and I think that they had the potential to be more interesting than they were, but it just wasn't there. And I felt that their romance was just so easy. There was nothing that was really holding them back from being together. Any conflict that did arise just felt forced. And I also was kind of disappointed with how the viral video storyline was executed, because it kind of just felt like it was there to bring you into the story, but then it wasn't really relevant at all, and its conclusion wasn't satisfying to me. So unfortunately, I did not like this book. I can see why other people would like it, so I don't want to steer people away. It's just that I didn't like it. So unfortunately, that's how I ended my month, but it really was a great reading month. I mean, 5-star books is a lot for 1 month, and I mean, I can't be anything but satisfied. So yeah, I am really excited to continue making some videos this month. I have a lot of fun plans, including a reading vlog that I may be starting today. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you all so much for watching. I am so excited for this channel, and I'm so excited that there are people who are watching, and so I just thank you all. If you aren't subscribed, I hope that you will subscribe. I hope that you will comment about how you feel about these books, if you've read any of them. I've been responding to everybody, so I just really appreciate you all, and I'm excited to keep going with this. Thank you. Bye.